The Milwaukee Bucks snapped their 3-game losing streak with a win over the LeBron-less Lakers. Luka did have 45 points, his Lakers high, but it wasn't enough to contend with an even scoring balance from the Bucks, who had 4 different players score at least 20 points. So we'll talk about how the Bucks got back on track, plus more on the other side of the intro.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What it do? Welcome to Locked On Bucks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Camille Davis, an NBA analyst with the Locked On Network and co-host of the Technical Foul Podcast. Joining me is Frank Madden, longtime voice of the pod and the founder of brewhoop.com. And we appreciate you for tuning in and making Locked On Bucks your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast, as well as on YouTube and in newsletter form. Make sure you head over to lockedondaily.com and start your day with the free Locked On Bucks newsletter. Today's episode is also brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Speaking of 5, Frank, the Bucks had 5 different Bucks players finish with double-digit scoring. 4 of those Bucks players had at least 20. You had Giannis with 24, you had Dame with 22, and they did their work. But something that stood out to me with the broadcast, they kept mentioning like, hey, Dame got off to a slow start. He's off to a slow start, but he's starting to pick it up. And I don't know if I would use that language in this Bucks win over the Lakers, because although Dame wasn't looking for his shot in the first quarter, he was really dictating the game. Like, he had 6 assists in the first quarter before he opened up the second quarter on his own personal, I believe it was like a 7-0 run at the free throw line alone. Giannis saw a lot of double teams early, found his teammates for some good looks, and I thought they did a really good job of just pacing the team, moving the offense along until they were able to get into spots for them to really take advantage of the scoring load themselves. What did you see from those two tonight?
I mean, it's interesting context, right? Because they're coming off, must have been the lowest scoring combined game for them all season in Indianapolis, right? They only scored, I think, 34 combined, and mainly because they just didn't take shots. And that was, again, the story in this one. I think Dame had like 2 shots up until like midway through the first quarter, through the second quarter or something like that. And it was a similar one for Giannis. He only had 6 shots in the first half, 6 points, and then got going a little bit in the third quarter. But, you know, it's kind of one of those interesting things, right? Like the weird part about the Bucks offense has been you have the highest scoring duo in the league. They've both been really efficient. They're both unselfish playmakers. You've got a whole bunch of guys shooting really well from 3 around them, and the offense is average. Like it just doesn't really add up with this group, especially given that Dame and Giannis have mostly been healthy, right? I mean, yeah, they've missed some games, but it's not like you had, knock on wood, to deal with Giannis being out for 2 months or Dame missing, 6 weeks for something, right? Like, and they missed some games, but for the most part, they've been relatively healthy. So it's one of the weird things about the Bucks offense is just the fact that, like, this, I've talked a lot about this team in general, but especially the offense, it's less than the sum of its parts. And, I think at times they can get, turnover prone. Certainly in Indianapolis, we saw the turnovers were an issue. Offensive rebounds obviously have been pretty terrible all year. They don't give themselves, kind of extra benefits in terms of the math, in terms of just getting more shots than the other team because of the turnover differential and rebounding differential, which is ironic because they're not a bad turnover team and they're a very good defensive rebounding team, but they just get no offensive rebounds, and they have these streaks, where they get sloppy and go live ball turnovers. So I think the funny part, though, offensively, is so often, and I usually think of it through the lens of Giannis, because I think when Dame is getting the ball taken out of his hands, I think that oftentimes is a problem. I think in this game, as you pointed out, he was making plays for others and keeping the ball moving. So it wasn't like, he just couldn't get involved, but he was making plays, and they were making threes. And similar for Giannis, he maybe wasn't taking shots, but they were doubling him, sending a lot of extra bodies. And I give credit. I don't like Reggie Miller as an announcer, but I think he did make a comment at one point where, like, some of the doubles were just like pretty quick,
too late or too early.
And
yeah,
exactly. And so Giannis was just like, oh, you're doubling right here. Like, I haven't even started to dribble yet, but like Torian Prince is wide open under the basket, hook pass, layup, he got Brook, a number of times. They had the high-low thing working, which was probably the most the Lakers' lack of size really didn't shine through in terms of like defending Giannis. They were able to just throw a ton of bodies at Giannis and really limit him. But Brook was able to eat down low.
Mm-hmm.
Jericho Sims, had some offensive rebounds, also had a couple plays where he forced a tip that went out of bounds. So the Bucks got a team rebound, which doesn't really like show up in the stats so much. But, I think when Giannis and Dame are drawing attention and making the right play and passing the ball, that's usually when the Bucks offense sort of is at its highest peak, right? And obviously, okay, maybe its highest peaks when those guys also score 30 and get, 10 to 12 assists or something like that. But I thought this was a good example of where, so often when you look at how the best teams play Giannis in particular, Celtics just play Giannis straight up. We've seen this a lot. Like they're like, you want to beat us one-on-one? Like we think.
Go ahead. Cavs too.
Exactly. We think we can limit you a little bit. If you want to kill us with mid-rangers, like we'll live with it, right? And so I think a game like this, I think was a good example of just how good the Bucks can look offensively, even when Giannis doesn't have a monster night, even when Dame doesn't have a monster night, because those guys become the playmakers, the unselfish decision makers that they are. And they had a bunch of other guys step up, right? And we already mentioned Brook. Kevin Porter, yet again, we're seeing now less of the kind of pairing of Giannis and Dame throughout the game, a lot more of Giannis playing with Kevin Porter. And
even Dame with Kevin Porter too.
Yeah, so there's some more staggering between those guys. And so, KPJ, another huge night. The 3-ball was working. We haven't seen a lot of that from him this year, although he's been a solid 3-point shooter previously in his career. So that obviously would be a big boost if he becomes more dangerous. We've seen him draw a few fouls on threes over the past week, which is interesting. He kind of has like it's a little bit of a weird form on his three, but he kind of floats forward on it. So tends to draw a little bit of contact. But yeah, again, like, I don't know, Camille, like if you have the same, but like, it's sort of like funny how often you see huge total team point numbers and you look at the box score. And so often the star players don't score a lot because it's just like balance and everybody making plays, passing, shooting, hitting threes, et cetera. And, 126 tonight, not like some record breaking night scoring for the Bucks, but, a very good offensive performance, pretty good 3-point shooting night, 17 out of 40. But give the Bucks credit, they were +6 on threes. The Lakers were 15 of 40. And even without a huge benefit and advantage from the 3-point range, the Bucks won the math game that I always talk about in terms of the shots. They had 15 more free throw attempts against a Laker team that pretty much always gets calls.
We saw Luka with 7 free throws in the first quarter.
Yeah. So I think they created more shots for themselves. They didn't give up any second chances. They really kept the Lakers out of the paint, which is where the lack of size, I think, really showed. Luka put on a show at times, but he was -16 and had 6 turnovers. So if you win the Luka minutes, this version of the Lakers without LeBron, you're going to feel pretty good that you're going to win this basketball game. And they won, I think no Laker had a positive plus-minus tonight, which felt like a good statement about the Bucks kind of withstanding, any small runs the Lakers went on. And, there weren't any lineups that the Bucks had that were like really problematic. So just a really, really necessary and, solid team win.
A comfortable win for the most part for this Bucks team. Like, it was close in the first quarter. I think it was like a 4-point game at the end of the first. End of the second, they stretched a little bit. I think it was like a 7 or 8 point game at that point. In the third quarter, they really were able to blow it open. And I want to talk a bit more about the defensive attention that they gave Luka and what they tried to do to slow him down, because I thought in the third quarter they really did do a fantastic job of just making it a little bit more difficult on him to be that hub and have everything go through him and continue to score at the level that he was in the first half. But before we even get to Luka, I want to touch on some of those other scorers that you were talking about, like Kevin Porter Jr., Brook Lopez. Gary Trent Jr. had some really big games for the Bucks offensively in this balanced scoring night for the team. So more on some of the others for the Bucks who showed up big time for him after this. I am such a big fan of FanDuel, and now March Madness is here, so it's about to go crazy. FanDuel is also giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. So right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's 200 extra bucks to use on everything from the buzzer beaters to the Cinderella stories to even who's going to cut down the nets at the very end. And with tournament games happening almost every single day, there's always something exciting to bet on. The FanDuel app is easy to use, and when I win, I get paid instantly. There is no waiting around, and y'all know I don't play about my money. When I win, I want it now. And FanDuel makes sure I can get that really, really quickly. So make sure that you go and visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoops action all tournament long. Okay, Frank, the Bucks, as mentioned, had 5 different guys that scored in double-digit points. Brook Lopez had 23. Kevin Porter Jr. had 22. Gary Trent Jr. had 16. All 3 were huge for the Bucks tonight, helping to carry that scoring load with the attention that the Lakers were putting on Giannis with the double teams, on Dame. And I loved how the 2 of them used their gravity to help other guys get buckets. And I felt like with Brook, he had a game where nothing felt forced. Like, the shot selection was really good from Brook. I loved the little push shot he was getting to, a couple of threes along the way, just using his size. He played some impressive defense. I thought that his last block of the night, he had 4 blocks in total, but the last one was the one that had me just be like, okay, Brook, because he had to hustle for it. The Bucks were sending a double at Luka, given how he had been cooking in the first half, got the Bucks in the rotation. I believe Giannis took the roller and Brook had to close out to the corner. It was DFS in the corner. Brook got there in enough time to like block the 3-point shot attempt from the corner. Bucks go the other way. Just a great effort, I thought, offensively and defensively from Brook. We mentioned Kevin Porter Jr., his highest scoring game as a Buck, hit 5 threes tonight, the most he's hit all season, despite a Laker, a Clippers jersey or a Bucks jersey, 5 made threes. This season is a season high for him. And Gary Trent Jr. continuing to come back after being out a couple of games from that hyper extension in his knee. So I thought what we saw from the 3 of them in particular, offensively, defensively too, was really big for this Bucks squad tonight.
Yeah, I mean, we keep talking about it since the break, right? I think Brooks really elevated his offensive game. I think the consistency offensively, we saw it on Tuesday in Indiana as well. Unfortunately, they ended up wasting a big fourth quarter and a big overall performance from Brook offensively in that game. And, so I think with Chris gone, I think there is that question if we're going to complain about offense, right? The question is like, who's going to score points? Mm-hmm. And obviously with Brook, it's different. He's not a, shot creator, in the way that you think of, a third option typical type of guy. But I think one of the things that, I felt pretty strongly when Kuzma was acquired for Chris was that, Kuzma is not now the third banana. Right. Like he's too erratic, too unreliable as a shooter in particular, to treat him like that guy. Like you're not going to, have him carry a second unit. That's not the kind of player he is. He's a good transition guy, cutter, chaos agent in general. Nice. But he's not a guy that, you're going to kind of run a lot of plays for and try to have him, carry a 6-minute stretch while, Dame and Giannis are on the bench. And so the question is then who do you look to give you that spark? And of course, I think Brook has obviously been really important. He was, again, really kind of looked like he was slowed and wasn't as sharp leading up to the All-Star break and has seemed much more energized coming back. So that's been really important. And then obviously, Kevin Porter Jr., new guy in town. I mean, it's funny to look at the Bucks acquisitions at the trade deadline because, I mean, obviously KPJ has been just found money, compared to Marjan, who wasn't going to play and wasn't playing, to, Kevin Porter being a guy who's pretty much immediately becomes the backup point guard, shot creator, second unit lead guy. Now obviously I think they're trying to figure out how they get him, as you were saying, more minutes with Dame, how they get him more minutes with Giannis. He's earned that, right? We'll see. I think he has to shoot threes, I think, to be able to fit in with those guys, because he can't just dribble mid-range jump shot when he's got Dame and Giannis out there. So that I think is going to take, that's a challenge for him. But I mean, he obviously gave them a huge boost in that, especially in that second quarter. when he started hitting those threes and getting the foul line. And, I think the other piece too, I mean, you kind of alluded to the defense, but I think all three of the guys they acquired at the deadline, just the switchability we've seen, whether it's Jericho Sims switching down. I mean, he had a couple of great defensive possessions against Luka. I was at the beginning of the fourth quarter. He had that great switch onto him where he forced the 24-second violation where Luka got kind of pinned on the baseline and couldn't get it off the rim. And the announcers didn't acknowledge it at all. And I was just like, give Jericho Sims some love. The dude is moving his feet really well.
And this comes after Reggie was saying against the Pacers, like, oh, Jericho Sims out in space. You don't want that. And it's like, nah, he's all right in space.
Yeah. And he got put on skates a little bit by Austin Reeves once or twice, but kind of recovered and, held up. And so, I mean, I think Sims' defense, his switchability, and then going the other direction, I think KPJ, I mean, look, like, are you going to want KPJ defending Jason Tatum in like important minutes on a switch? Like, okay, no. But it's interesting to look at the Bucks wings right now, because on the one hand, they don't have like tons of size,
right?
But KPJ, AJ Green in particular, like those guys really battle, and the different kinds of like physical attributes they have. KPJ is longer than AJ, but AJ is strong and moves his feet well, and so I think that's pretty important, because I think it's given the Bucks a lot more flexibility. Now when Jericho comes in, you can switch your five, and you can switch these wing guys a fair bit, and Gary Trent as well, right? He's a bit smaller. I don't think he's as strong as those guys, but he's obviously kind of can be a pest, and can be more hunting passing lanes, which KPJ has also done a really good job. I mean, I think his steals per 36 numbers, I have to check, but like they've got to be like the best on the team, or at least close with Rollins. So yeah, I mean, again, like you kind of can't say enough about what those guys have meant, and I think that's important, because like with Kuzma, you take some of the pressure off, because like right now, I mean, tonight offensively he was pretty MIA for most of the game.
He was aggressive early, but they were not falling.
Yeah. So, but that's important, right? Because again, like given the way it's constructed now, like this is a two-headed monster team, and they need other guys to be able to complement and play off those guys. They need Brook to play high-low with Giannis. They need Brook to pick and pop. And they need, KPJ to come off the bench and give them those kind of adrenaline shots in the arm type minutes, especially when at least one of the big two is on the bench. So yeah, I mean, I think pretty comprehensive victory. And, I think the defensive numbers tonight in aggregate were very good, even with the Lakers shooting well from three, and obviously Luka putting on a show. And of course, I think that showed the Lakers' lack of scoring depth after Luka and Austin Reeves. But, again, I mean, the Lakers are a team that they've been good this year, and they've been good of late. And obviously losing LeBron is obviously they have a huge hole in their lineup. But they beat the Bucks twice last year without LeBron. And, I don't know how you felt, Camille, but when the Bucks were up 20 in the fourth quarter, I was just like, okay, this happened. This is where we were last year too. And then they blew that game. So I was like, step on these dudes like throats. Let's like end this. I don't want to drag this out any more than we need to. So thank you, Bucks, for not making this dramatic. We needed like a snoozer, kind of end to end kind of win, and fortunately that's what we got.
A comfortable win, I would say, for the Bucks in that second half there as they pulled away. But I listened to part of Kevin Porter Jr.'s post-game presser after tonight's game against the Lakers, and he mentioned, like, when I got here on defense, he's like, I'm a gambler. Like, I like to take some risk, and I realize, with film and everything, that I can't be as much of a chaos agent in that sense of just going for the gamble. Like, I have to be a little bit more sturdy and sound in some of my principles. And he mentioned that's been a focus of his over the last few days. So my steal numbers might go down. I'm gonna get my hand on a few, don't get me wrong. But I just probably won't get as many as before, because the team just needs me to be defensively sound more than anything else. And he also mentioned that, when he got here, he was really trying just to fit in with the team. And, he said his teammates were telling him, like, yo, F that. We need you to fit out. We need you to be who you are. But he mentioned with that, he knows with sharing the floor with Giannis and Dame, for him, he's going to have to be a perimeter threat. and how he's been working on that 3-point shot because he understands it's going to be a really crucial piece for his game with this team going forward. And the broadcast mentioned some really interesting pieces about Kyle Kuzma and his transition over to the Bucks and his conditioning and how they're using him defensively. And I thought that for everything Kuz couldn't get going for himself offensively, he was able to get a lot going defensively, especially in that second half when guarding Luka. And even though Luka went off for 45, the way the Bucks were able to slow him down somewhat in the second half played a big factor in them being able to pull away in that second half. So let's talk a little bit more about that defense on Luka and what the Bucks did differently in the second half after this. I know I can't be the only one who has ever checked their bank account and wondered, where did all of my money go? Between dining out and DoorDash and online shopping, entertainment, video games. In my case, it's easy to lose track of where the money went. And that's where Monarch Money comes in. It's your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center because with Monarch Money, you can track all your accounts, your investments, and your spending all in one place. So you can stop just managing your money and start building wealth. So instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track your spending, and even plan long-term goals. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off of your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNBA for half off of your first year. Luka was putting on the show here in Milwaukee. Saw him at the Thanasis having some words on the sideline from time to time. And again, I think what the Bucks did defensively on Luka in the second half was a key part of them being able to pull away. Like the Bucks led for most of the game, as we've mentioned, but they were really able to pull away in the third quarter and extend that lead. Got it up to like 23 and then kind of rolled around that 20-point lead for the rest of the way. And Luka cooked the first half. He had 16 points in the second half, which you would look at and be like, that's still pretty good. But when you look at the fact that he had 16 points in the first quarter alone, to hold him to 16 for the entire second half on worse efficiency was a win. TNT pointed out that when Kyle Kuzma was the primary defender on Luka, Luka went 1 for 6. And like I mentioned, Kuz didn't have much going from offensively, but I did like his impact on the game defensively. The Bucks threw Kuz at him. You saw AJ Green get some pretty good stops on him, some swipes on the ball, a couple of doubles at times. We saw Sim switch out on him, like just different bodies. But I really liked what Kyle Kuzma was able to do while defending Luka in this game.
Yeah, I mean, if you ask me, what is the best way to stop any superstar, unstoppable type guy, right? Which obviously Luka's in that rarefied air of, top 5 offensive weapons in basketball. Variety. You said it, variety, right? That's what you have to do against any of these guys. Like
you change it up.
Whether it's Jokic, Giannis, Luka, LeBron, you just cannot do the same thing over and over. These guys are too smart. The reason they are who they are is because there is no single way to stop them. Because that's why they're superstars. It's because they can adapt and they're smart and they attack, any one-on-one matchup, they can figure out some way to attack it and find an advantage. And so I think with Luka, I liked giving Kuzma a shot there. He's obviously longer and I think a little quicker, to be honest, than Taurean Prince. I think Taurean's interesting because he's like a solid defensive guy, but he doesn't really, he's so often now, especially with this jumbo lineup, having to guard guys smaller. He's having to be the point of attack guy on smaller, quicker guys. And that's, to me, is like his biggest weakness is that, he's kind of got like the foot speed of, like a 4-3, not a like 3-2 or a 2-3, which is sort of how he's being used defensively. And so, I think like you saw it against Indiana in particular, right? Like, every possession, I mean, the Pacers had a bad offensive, like half court scoring night, efficiency wise, but every possession, it felt like they could just, take 2 dribbles, get to the middle of the floor, set a screen, take 2 dribbles and get like a wide open shot somewhere from three or wherever. And they were like 13 of 39 from three. And that was the irony, right? Everybody was so mad, understandably, about the last three. That was like the best defended three the Bucks
had that whole
had all game. like people acting like, oh, why weren't you ready for that? It's like, it was a hyper contested catch and shoot, like corner fading, like three.
Yeah.
It's like, like, again, you wish obviously Giannis hadn't been as aggressive defending it, but that was the hardest three Halliburton took all night, and it happened to go in. So I don't know. Like, I think people just gets too kind of results oriented about a lot of these types of things. And with Luka, same thing, right? Like, I don't know. Did I think the Bucks were bad, hopeless, like bad strategically? Like, no, I think they tried a bunch of different stuff, and obviously individually he made a bunch of plays. But that's what Luka does, like AJ Green had that terrific defensive possession against him in the first half, and Luka just hits a crazy fading three. It's like, I mean, if you tell me like, oh, AJ Green's too small to defend him, it's like, okay, you're just mad. You're just arguing the result rather than the process. And I think that's all. As a coach, I think all you can do is think about the process and approach you're going to use, and then you just hope the guy misses some shots. But I think the doubles, I think, were smart, and we might remember Doc's first win with the Bucks came last year in Dallas, where they were down 20 plus points in the first half, and then they just absolutely turned the game around and ended up winning by double digits. And a lot of what they did in that game was doubling Luka, taking the ball out of his hands, which I don't think that's like
the key to defending Luka.
Exactly. I don't think that's like how you shut down Luka Dončić. I think it happened to work in that game. I think in this game, obviously, with no LeBron, that limits sort of their second side ways to attack when Luka makes a pass. But they turned him over 6 times, and I think 2 or 3 of those probably had to be steals that led to fast breaks out of those doubles. So I think definitely give Doc and Greg Buckner some credit, because they tried to keep Luka guessing a little bit, and they were able to take some advantage there. But yeah, just it takes a team effort to defend a guy like that, because if you defend him too well, then he's going to find somebody else that was open. And fortunately, it felt like, I don't know, it was a little surprising to me that the Lakers shot 38% from three. I think a lot of it was Austin. Yeah, exactly. Like and obviously Luka hit a bunch of threes, but it felt like when Luka was passing, I didn't really feel like that worried that the guy he was passing to was going to make a shot, because a lot of times it was not guys that you necessarily trust to hit threes. So so they did not shut Luka Dončić down.
Nope.
But they beat Luka Dončić when he was on the floor, and that's all that matters. Luka can score 70. If he's minus 16, you live with it.
Yeah, you find a way to win, and the Bucks definitely did that in this game, which again snapped a 3-game losing streak for them. And up next on Saturday, game against the Indiana Pacers, a big game for the Bucks here. When we look at the standings, a big game for the Bucks. When we look at the tiebreaker here, because the Pacers win, they get that tiebreaker based on their divisional record. Bucks win, they get that tiebreaker over the Pacers having a 3-1 season series record over them. Frank, as we wrap up here and look ahead a little bit to that Pacers game, outside of a win, because of course it's what we all want to see done differently for the Bucks here against the Pacers here, but is there anything that you want to see them execute differently against the Pacers on Saturday? I feel like the offense was working pretty well for them. Down the stretch, I wish I would have seen a little bit more from Giannis and Dame taking the ball and being a little bit more aggressive down the stretch. But what are some things that you're looking to see against this Pacers team on Saturday in this really, really big game here?
I want Giannis to see blood. I want Giannis to, I think, wasn't there that stat they called out on Tuesday? Like Giannis had averaged was it 39 points a game over, the last few years against them, which feels about right. I mean, he had a 64-point game. He had another 50-point game. I mean, he's just been a monster against the Pacers. So yeah, I mean, pretty much he was only 8 out of 17 tonight. I think that was, I know he had his first sub 50% shooting game was against the Knicks. One of those bad losses, like maybe 6 weeks ago, or whenever that last Knicks loss was. He's had some of his worst offensive games. I mean, he really has not been the same explosive scorer since the All-Star break. Again, like, what is his health really like right now? I don't know. It's not like his mid-range has like completely abandoned him or something like that. It does feel like it's, him not getting to the basket, maybe with the same just ferocity that he had previously. I think also the other thing too is when you think about teams trying to take away Giannis by showing him a lot of bodies, the outlet previously was, well, Chris Middleton's going to like just throw up some improvised alley-oops. They're going to run some pick and roll and get him some easy baskets that way. And he doesn't have that anymore. So, I mean, that's also probably part of the story a little bit here as far as why his scoring maybe has not been as consistent or as dominant as maybe it was previously. So I don't know. I mean, I think, I feel like at times, especially in that Pacers game, I think, seeing them just go back to the Damian pick and roll, I think that's something I would like to see continue to happen. And I think you're going to get, good shots out of that, whether it's Giannis actually rolling to the basket, getting the ball to attack, whether it's Dame being able to get himself a shot, or obviously one of those guys making a read if there's, extra bodies and finding somebody else open. I think obviously that's just the process you trust in. So yeah, I hope we see Dame and Giannis really come out and assert themselves. And this is a game. This is a big game in the regular season. It means a lot in the standings, as you said. The tiebreaker. Chris Middleton helped the Wizards beat the Pistons tonight. Thank you, Chris.
Yeah. Appreciate you, 22.
Another revenge game against the Detroit Pistons for Chris Middleton. Still hasn't forgiven them for trading him in 2013. Yeah, so I think it's you have these two Pacer games, and then the Bucks finished the season with 2 games against the Pistons.
Yeah.
So I mean, we've seen at the end of the season. I don't know the last time the Bucks played a game. Well, I guess last year they rested. They obviously didn't have Giannis.
Yeah.
They in theory had an incentive to win that game, but it didn't feel like they really went all out. And so yeah, but these Pistons games feel like they're going to matter, just given how congested the East standings are right now. And honestly, with the way the Bucks schedule is shaping up, I hope they matter because I hope the Bucks aren't like stuck in 6th by the time those games come around. So yeah, I'm in Milwaukee for a few days with my oldest daughter. I'm hoping to go to the game on Saturday night. So Bucks, do it for me.
That's right.
Do it for me. I haven't seen a game since I think last year. So yeah, do me a solid. Show my daughter Tilly a win. She's gonna have on her Giannis purple 90s Bucks throwback jersey on. So do me that solid on Saturday night. That's all I ask.
Hey, I'm asking for it as well, not just for you and your daughter, but for me and all the Bucks fans around here as well. I'm looking forward to that game on Saturday. But luckily, the Bucks did correct themselves from the 3-game losing skid, got back into the win column tonight against the Lakers with a 20-point victory, and now it's all eyes on that game on Saturday against the Pacers, which should be a really, really fun one. And then they have the Thunder the very next day, second night of a back-to-back. So a lot of fun basketball coming up, some big games for the Bucks, and we're going to have you covered on Locked On Bucks with all of that and more. So for Frank and myself, we'll catch you later. Have a good weekend, everybody.